In the hushed corridor of early dawn, I found myself wrestling with a question I could not yet answer. Could a single, almost imperceptible gesture change the course of many lives? That Tuesday morning, as I pushed open the towering glass doors into the lobby of Orion Media, I carried little more than my nerves and an unspoken hope. I was to become invisible in all the ways that matter, until the moment I chose not to. I arrived early, as always, the building not yet humming with the frenzy of executives, interns, and clients. But the air was already charged, as though every wall and silent corridor anticipated the coming storm of movement and urgency. At 23 years old, I was only just bridging the distance between girl and woman. Recently graduated with a degree in communications, timid, trying to find the shape my life should take. My name was Rosa, though few in the office ever remembered it. My tasks were small: organizing binders, proofreading printouts, replenishing coffee stations, and quietly hoping I would not draw attention to myself. That morning, I was stationed in the reception hall, fielding deliveries and arranging displays for the big presentation our team was preparing. The boardrooms would soon fill with clients, and the corridors would echo with footsteps and exclamations. I tried to stay focused, but then I saw him. He was a man in his late 60s, dressed as though for a business meeting rather than a wanderer in a glass lobby. His suit was dark slate, impeccable in its tailoring. His hair silvered, swept back, his posture still dignified. But he was already losing poise. He stood alone near the reception desk, shifting weight from foot to foot, arms moving with subtle gestures that went unnoticed, or rather, uncomprehended by those around him. Jessica, our receptionist, asked him something. Her tone was courteous but brisk. He gestured again, his lips moving silently. Jessica frowned. She asked him if he had an appointment. He shook his head. She asked him to write down a name. He searched for something to write with. Then he shook his head again, as though the request itself was shutting the door between him and any possibility of communication. No one intervened. Executives in tailored suits walked past him, their glances fixed straight ahead. Junior analysts rushed to meetings, their phones ringing, their pace brisk. The man's shoulders lost height, his dignity threatened by invisible weight. And as I watched, a memory flickered in my mind. My sister, my only sibling, Lily, born deaf, for whom I had taught myself to sign. Everything about her struggle, and the times she had been overlooked, all those small cruelties and invisibilities surged into my chest. I hesitated. In the architecture of corporate order, I had no place to speak. My supervisor, Myra, had made it clear. My role was to support, not to intervene. But I felt something inside me rise, a voice I had not heard in years. I stood, moved across the floor, and when I was a few feet away, I paused, steadied myself, and signed slowly. "Hello. My name is Rosa. Can I help you?" His hands halted mid-motion. The surprise in his eyes was immediate, as though a dam had broken. Then his own fingers moved, fluidly, surely. He responded in sign, "Thank you." I was beginning to think no one here would understand me. Relief softened his face. He spelled his name, "Gerald Norman." He said he had come to see his daughter, but I'm not sure how to reach her. My heart skipped. Norman. The same name that appeared on the directory board at the mezzanine. A name I had learned belongs to our CEO. I swallowed, then asked him if he would like to rest in one of the lobby chairs while I see what I could do. He nodded. But how could a lowly assistant, someone whose voice in meetings was barely heard, facilitate an audience with the chief executive? I rose to the challenge because I sensed something deeper at stake. I called extension, CEO, office, and waited for the assistant, a woman named Elaine, to answer. Her tone was direct, clipped. I told her, "I have Mr. Gerald Norman here in the lobby. He says he wishes to see his daughter." Silence, then a question. "Her father. I will check with my office. Ask him to wait." I conveyed that, returned to Gerald, and sat with him. We conversed in sign, slow at first, then easier as he told me fragments. He was an architect by training years ago. His late wife had taught at an institution for the deaf in their home state. He had raised his children with care, but had drifted apart from his daughter in recent years. There was pride in his eyes, sadness too. He admitted he had arrived here because he hoped, perhaps foolishly, to see her in person, even though he had no appointment, no schedule. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Elaine called back. The CEO was tied up in meetings, could not receive visitors for at least another hour. Gerald's face sagged. He signed. I should go. I don't want to trouble anyone. I signed in reply. You are not a trouble. Would you like to wait longer? I can show you around. You haven't seen where your daughter works. His eyes brightened. He nodded. And so I launched us into what became an impromptu tour of Orion Media, the very building he owned. I, an assistant with no right to escort visitors, led him through corridors, slid open doors, introduced him to teams, translated conversations. I described the graphic studio while he admired the visual composition, the copywriting floor while he listened to concept pitches. We passed through the analytics department, the meeting rooms, even the executive lounge. I made sure colleagues greeted him, explained what they did, and he asked questions, smiling, engaged, his pride revived. Through it all, I sensed eyes shifting toward us. Employees paused in doorways, curious. And on the mezzanine floor, half hidden behind a column, I noticed a figure standing still. A tall man, arms folded, watching our tour. He stayed there motionless for what felt like minutes before disappearing. My heart pounded. The CEO was observing this unscheduled walkthrough, and I was deeply overstepping my assigned tasks. We finished upstairs in the executive wing. Gerald paused before polished walnut walls and acclaimed photographs, signed. She built all this, I nodded. She has been leading the company for years now. He looked around, his expression wistful, and signed. I'm proud. I just wish I knew her better. His longing echoed in me. I thought of the distance between generations, of pride unspoken, of relationships frayed by absence. We returned to the lobby, and I felt a weight settle in my chest. The man would leave without seeing his daughter. Thank you, he signed to me, hands trembling slightly. You have made my day. I understand now her world. As I turned to leave his side, I saw Myra approaching, her lips tight, her eyes stormy. She opened her mouth to scold me, to reprimand me for neglecting my duties. But before her words could land, a firm voice intervened. Actually, Myra, I'll speak with Miss Rosa first. I turned to see him, the CEO, stepping into the lobby. He stood tall, composed, but I saw something unusual in his eyes, a quiet gravity, an authority softened by surprise. Myra sputtered her objections. He raised a hand. He said, she was supposed to be working on presentation materials, I believe, but what she did today, she helped my father, and she did it beautifully. The lobby grew hushed. Gerald looked from his daughter's boss to me in astonished joy. And then, slowly, Michael Norman, CEO, signed to his father. I'm sorry I made you wait. I only learned you were here when I saw you meeting with Rosa. I've been watching for some time. Gerald's face flooded with emotion. The crowd in the lobby stilled. Father and son embraced, right in front of everyone. Tears glistened in eyes that had not cried in years. And Michael turned to me, still trembling. Miss Rosa, may I speak with you in my office? I nodded, stunned. Inside his office, the air felt charged with significance. He asked me to sit across from him, and then he surprised me. He apologized not to fire me, but for how his own company had treated his father over the years. He told me that in his decade as CEO, Gerald had only visited 3 times, each time greeted as a disturbance, not as family. He said he had seen, from his vantage point, how I abandoned my assigned tasks to make his father feel dignified, seen, included. He said he was moved to tears. He told me that what I had done, not strategic work, not revenue management, was something he had failed to do for years, grant belonging. Then he paused and asked, would you like to help me change how this company treats people like your sister, like my father, people we overlook? I want to create a role for you, Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. He described the position, designing policies, organizing training, ensuring the building and communications would not exclude anyone. He said the role would be directly under him, with real authority and resources. I blinked. I stammered objections. I was just an assistant with no formal HR experience, still finishing my graduate degree. But he shook his head gently. You have something many do not, empathy, perception, the ability to see people who are often unseen. That is rare in business. He offered full salary, benefits, freedom to enact sweeping changes. He said he needed someone like me, someone who would see what others neglected. I looked at Gerald, who sat radiantly at my side, signing with uncontainable excitement. I looked back at Michael, whose eyes were grave and hopeful, and I accepted. In the weeks and months that followed, everything changed. My first work was an audit of accessibility, physical, communicative, procedural throughout Orion Media. The audit revealed gaps: missing visual alert systems, meetings without interpreters, promotional materials unreadable to those with visual impairments, no accommodation policy for mobility or hearing loss. I proposed sweeping reform. Install visual alerts, hire sign language interpreters, require all meetings to include captions, redesign communications to be inclusive, and implement training for all employees, from junior staff to senior executives. At first, resistance surfaced. People said, "This is extra work." Myra, my former supervisor, said she had been so focused on deadlines that she missed what really mattered. But gradually, she became one of my most enthusiastic allies, attending sign language classes, asking questions. I brought in speakers from the deaf community, including Gerald, to share experience. I taught lunchtime ASL sessions. I worked with HR to revise hiring policies toward inclusivity. I convinced the executive team to engage, to open their eyes. Culture shifted. The lobby that once dismissed visitors now greeted them with dignity. The employees began scanning for those left on the margins. They asked, they listened, they adapted. 6 months after that fateful Tuesday, Orion Media was awarded a national prize for workplace inclusion. At the ceremony, Michael asked me to accept the honor, not for me alone, but on behalf of all those who chose to see inclusion, not as a burden, but as a strength. In my speech, I spoke not of policies or profits, but of people. How the smallest gesture, a signed greeting, rippled through relationships, organizations, and identity. I thanked a wise man who taught me that the most essential skill in business is not closing deals, but noticing humanity. In the audience, Gerald signed applause, and Michael's eyes glistened. Their relationship had been remade. They now lunched every Friday, conversed openly in sign, shared memories and plans, and no longer lived in the distance that once separated them. I resumed my life with new purpose. Lily came to visit the office often, confident to speak in her language. Seeing colleagues spontaneously sign for her, interacting with her as a person rather than a curiosity, brought tears to my eyes. I felt I had become something of a guardian, not wearing a cape, but championing a world where no one is unseen. All of it had begun with a simple signed hello to a man overlooked in a busy lobby. I learned that the most radical act is sometimes just to stop, to see someone, to whisper, "You matter." And in doing so, I discovered I was not only changing their world, I was changing mine.